Hello, Garland Nixon here. We're hanging out with Ray McGovern, and a little something happened yesterday up in Alaska, and we're going to try to figure out if it was significant at all. Maybe it was an insignificant happening, but we'll figure that out. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here, and we're hanging out with the one and only Ray McGovern. And of course, we're going to talk about the Alaska summit and what it means. We're going to talk about, of course, we're going to touch on Gaza, which is the moral issue of our time at some point. I think we would be missing our calling if we didn't on every I try to touch base on on Gaza and comment on it on every stream that I do. But let's start off with your thoughts on Ray last night. I'm just going to back away and throw it at you. What are your thoughts on the Alaska summit?
Well, Garland, as you can imagine, I've been very interested in this, following very closely, published things on it. And it's very heavy stuff. And it's primarily good news, despite all the naysayers and CNN and even some of my colleagues that couldn't figure out how this could possibly be good news. Well, look on the face of it, for God's sake. The two leaders are meeting together, right? The dehumanized Putin.
Isolated, dare I say. He's isolated, Ray.
Right? Isolated with the majority of the rest of the world, China, India, everybody else on his side. But, did they lay out the red carpet treatment for him? Well, you saw the photos. Yeah, they did. So this is big. But before we get into that, I think that maybe some of your listeners have been so kind of weary of all this important stuff. But so here's a little apocryphal little story from me. Now, I have to remember that when I was speaking one time to a bunch of professors in Washington, I said, now this is apocryphal, and I told this story. And then a woman professor, PhD, said, now, Mr. Mcgovern, did that really happen? And I didn't know how to let her down easy. I said, well, I said, well, no, it didn't happen. I said it was apocryphal. Okay, so apocryphal means didn't really happen. Okay, so I go to the cardiologist. And he said, no, Mcgovern, we see these little flutters here that were in my EKG, they're periodic, they're not. So we're going to give you one of these things to make sure that we monitor this thing. So you wear it for 30 days and then we check it out, So here it is, folks. Can you see it? Yeah. All right. So guess what happened the first night? Boop, 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 boop. Hello? Who is this? It's Lucifer 2. Lucifer 2. Yeah, well, that's my pseudonym. I'm really John Brennan. You better knock this stuff off, Mcgovern. Too much truth done. You're encouraging people like Tulsi Gabbard and all that stuff. So knock it off. So I thought, wait a second, John, and then he went away. So the Russians hacked into my heart monitor. Yeah. That's the modern. And please, that's apocryphal. My wife tells me not to tell these stories, but
they're great.
I got one more announcement for you, Garland. Big news. I was contacted immediately after the summit by major media for the first time about 7 or 8 years. I used to be on CNN a couple of times a year.
Yeah.
Well, so they answered the phone and they said, what do you think, Mr. Mcgovern? Now, I have to tell you, the major media was TASS, the Russian, the Russian service. So I said, well, what kind of a statement do you want? He said, well, we're putting something out. Can you give me something in 15 minutes? I said, sure. I thought the thing through. And, I hate to rely on Fox News, but that was it's the only guy that Trump talked to as he's on a plane going to Alaska. And he told Brett Baer, is that the way you pronounce it? Brett Baer. He said, Brett, I'm going to be awfully disappointed if we don't get something like a ceasefire out of this. I mean, I'll be awfully disappointed. So McGovern says, whoa, what? He says this to Brett Baer? Yeah, he does. And then he gets into these negotiations and he says, now, Mr. Putin, we really would like to have a ceasefire, ceasefire. And it's clear what happened. That Putin said, "Niet." I mean,
Yeah. Yet means yet.
You know what "niet" means. I said, "Oh, but maybe we could promise, cross our hearts, hope to die, never to let Ukraine into NATO." "Niet, Mr. President. Please tell Mr. President what 'niet' means." "Oh, maybe we could stop selling the rest of those arms that Biden put in the pipeline. Then we could have a ceasefire." "Niet." So it was really bizarre. You saw the press conference. Putin had some prepared remarks, nice things about Russia and Alaska and all that stuff. But Trump looked out of sorts. He didn't really. So what did he do? Well, here's the kicker, guys. He just said, "Oh, that didn't work. So, well, let's not try to get a ceasefire first, like the Europeans and everybody have demanded. Yeah, let's work for a broader framework agreement, and let's do the whole thing, okay?" No, I just read the Washington Post for this evening, and they are up in arms. My God, here's what they said just a week ago. Kiev and its European allies insist that any meaningful peace talks begin only with a ceasefire. Period. You got that? Okay, that's what we require. Well, Trump can probably, when Trump got on the phone with these cats, this coalition of the willing, I call them the coalition of the brain dead. Okay, he said, I tried it, and he said, "Niet." You guys know what "niet" means? So he said, look, he had spelled out his conditions a year ago. Hadn't I read them? And of course, I said, "Oh yeah, I read them," but I didn't really read them. So now I'm reading them. So what do you think, guys? I think maybe we ought to get Zelensky here, get him back into the God, into the Oval Office for Zelensky Part 2. My God. So Zelensky's going to be there on Monday now, just announced today. And the last time he was there, he had a really bad experience. So, I don't much care for Zelensky, but my God, I mean, the way he was treated, I almost felt sorry for him. I mean, he was really ganging up on this poor little guy, that in uniform. So anyhow, that's what's going to happen on Monday. So what am I saying here? I'm saying the thing was a success. Trump should have asked somebody. Maybe he did. Maybe he asked one of his advisors, "Should we try this?" "Oh yeah, try it, Donald. It might work because you have amazing persuasive power. You get old Vlad in a room and say, 'Look, Vlad, this is what I really need. Would you?'" "Yeah, that'll work. It'll work fine." What didn't work? Okay, so that's the nub of this thing. And I have to tell you that I didn't know that Trump had sort of given, the Europeans would say, given the store away. I didn't know he'd decided, okay, immediate ceasefire. We'll do what Putin's always insisted on. I didn't know that, but I told Tass the scenario up till then. Trump admitting to Fox News he's going to try. They're going to be very disappointed if it doesn't work. They're very disappointed, and he gets on a plane and comes home, and it's pretty clear. And guess what? Tass quoted me directly. I did it by, what do you call it? I did it by email, right? Okay, so, and I checked, and this is amazing, So I'm really elated that I got into mainstream media. I'm kind of sad still that it wasn't one of the ones here in the United States or even Al Jazeera or BBC or anything like that. But it's progress. And I dare say what happened later today turned out to be the next steps in this disappointment. Oh, well, nothing ventured, nothing gained. Screw that immediate ceasefire. Go away, Europeans. We're going to deal, and we'll deal with Zelensky first, and we'll tell him which end is up when he gets into the. We'll have all these guys. We'll have the vice president there, armed to the teeth, looking at Zelensky, this little guy, So, I mean, I'm jovial about this because no one really thought that Trump would sort of bend this far, and he can kind of justify this to his allies, the brain dead allies. I tried, and Putin said no, and then they would say, "Well, why did you give up then?" And Trump said, "Well, maybe you ought to get a report from the battlefield." I mean, even the Daily Telegraph, which is pretty much the 10 Downing Street rag there, yesterday said Kiev is lost. What are the Russians going to take next? so, even these people are realizing there's no way that the Russian juggernaut can be stopped. And what Putin has is all the high cards. And he can say to somebody like Trump, look, we can go fast, we can go slow, we can put lipstick on this pig of defeat for you guys, or we can just embarrass the hell out of you and push for something like unconditional surrender. Now, this is the main point, and I'll finish with this. Unconditional surrender. Putin doesn't want any part of that.
Right.
Nobody should, okay? Because he doesn't want to get involved in taking over the rest of Ukraine. That would be Vietnam for him. He knows what he knows what Afghanistan was like for the Soviets. So that's, when people say, well, what incentive does Putin have since he's so winning and he's going to, cream Kramatorsk and Pokrovsk and all these countries that are the main barrier to going to the river, the Dnieper. What's going to stop him? Because he doesn't want to go any farther. And he sees reason to work out a deal with a deal maker, and he will require a buffer zone, a cordon sanitaire, And so there's prospects of success. The fly in the ointment is going to be in the Oval Office on Monday, and he's going to get a big talking to. And I think Trump will say, look, we're sorry about this. I mean, Biden, my predecessor, even said back in 2015 that the worst thing we could possibly do for you Ukrainians is to give you the idea that you could match up and beat a much more powerful Russia on your doorstep. So we should have known better. I think we did know better, but then this guy Biden came in and he talked to these Blinken and Sullivan and said, "Oh, I think we can do it." And they said, "Oh, sure, we'll give it a try." So one little codicil here and then stop. When Obama, with a lot of experience behind himself now in foreign affairs, just the year before he leaves office, or 15 years around there. Yeah. So he says this, Ukraine can never win against a much tougher Russia on its doorstep, on its border. He said, look, we Americans need to kind of decipher and figure out what our core interests are, okay? What we go to war for. And Ukraine ain't one of those, okay? Ain't one of those. And so, so we're not going to give any offensive arms to Ukraine because that would play into this wish that not only they, but these neocons behind me that would like to start a war with Russia to weaken it, okay? So no offensive weapons, okay? So what happens? There was a deputy secretary of state working for Obama in those days. And he said, yes, Mr. President, You're absolutely right. Because every weapon that we could give Ukraine, Russia could match, double, triple, quadruple. Excellent idea, Mr. President. Now, who was that guy? I think I told you that before. Do you remember?
Tony Blinken.
Yeah,
It was Tony Blinken.
So he's working for Obama then. And they said, yes, sir. You know, that's what these guys are. But they didn't have to say yes, sir, to Biden. All they say is, Mr. President, Mr. President, well, yeah, okay, this is what we're going to do. It sounds like a good idea to me. Is it against the Russians? Yeah, okay, it's a good idea. And that's what we got now. So what I'm saying is that, you know, in all seriousness, here's Zelensky entering the White House. I don't know if Trump will have the kind of compassion, if that's the word, to say, look, we're sorry about this. It's our, now you bought into it. You listened to Boris Johnson and all those people, okay? But, you know, you shouldn't have, but it's really mostly our fault. We're sorry about that. We promise to support you for as long as it takes. Well, here, Monday to whatever it is, it's as long as it takes. So,
That's
you know,
how
now
long
if
it
you want to
took.
go to, the Europeans, good luck with that. The Europeans have a big mouths, but they don't have any. I mean, it's like Stalin asked the Pope, how many divisions do you have? You know, ask the Europeans how many divisions they have. Oh, they're going to buy a lot of arms from us. Yeah, they will. That's why they think that the Russian threat really won't come until 2029, because they know that we need 4 years to prepare. That's what they're saying in Europe now. The Russian threat. Well,
And
Russian
conveniently,
threat was never
Trump will be gone in
Yeah,
2028.
he'd be
So they're
gone.
thinking, oh, we'll have another Biden in and we'll just go ahead and do this. The U.S. can't even build the arms anyway. That stuff that's supposed to be delivered in 2029 won't be delivered in 2029. Well, you know, here's the thing, Ray, that I think is interesting here. And now I'll tell you, I certainly believe that at least some people in Washington have come to the fairly obvious conclusion, have a firm grasp of the obvious, at least some of them. And they're like, boy, things ain't looking good on the Ukraine front. This thing's going to fall apart. And, you know, what is it? Rats jump off a sinking ship. And I think there's people in Washington saying, how can we distance ourselves from this catastrophic defeat? I really think that's part of it. They're looking at it, they're like, oh, this don't look good. How can we distance ourselves from this? It ain't going to be easy. But I do think that's kind of what they're trying to do. You know, they've played the game with the Europeans. They pretended that the Russians are fighting with shovels and washing machines. Oh, that was all great in all the newspapers. But now the Russians are doing what the Russians do. They chip away, chip away, and eventually the foundation of the enemy falls and the enemy crumbles like a house of cards. And that's what's happening to the Europeans. And I think the Americans are like, yeah, we don't want to be sitting around, you know, taking this one on the chin. And I think that's a big part of it. Now, notwithstanding that I don't necessarily think that their motives are pure, shall we say, that they're not just like, oh boy, let's do peace now. That's irrelevant. What's the whole part of it is this. The Russians believe, as do I, that these two nuclear powers should always have a close discussion, should always be working. Now, I'm reading today now the U.S. ambassador the Russian ambassador, I think, to the UN or something is saying, okay, we're going to start talking closer now. Trump is now saying, you know, we're not going to fool with these secondary tariffs on China and other people. We're not even talking about that anymore. And I think that was part of the discussion that, guys, it's going to hurt you and ain't hurting them and they ain't going to stop buying. I think that was made clear to them. Our partners ain't going to stop buying from us. You probably don't want to do this. Trump is also, and this is what I think is critical. The discussion, the narrative was, this is about expansion, imperial expansion, and they want to take more ground. That's all it's about, nothing else. Now Trump comes out and says, well, we discussed NATO, security issues, and trade ground and, you know, trading ground or whatever. So I think what the Russians really got was the bilateral negotiations that they feel should always be there between these two nations. And the narrative was, oh, it's, the refusal of the West to admit that this was an issue of NATO expansion and Russia wanting a security agreement on their border, and the acceptance that Russia had a legitimate right to have security concerns and input on the security architecture in the European theater. And I think that's a big part of what's coming. Anyway, Ray, your thoughts on all of that?
No, I think you're absolutely right there. Trump actually about 3 months ago now said gratuitously, and I can understand why Russia wouldn't want a heavily armed, best trained army right on Ukraine, but I can understand that. Well, I mean, if you understood it, and that says a lot, because that's the core issue. Now, what Putin may have said is, look, if your people are not telling you all there is out there, and you doubt, or you doubt that we knew that this was a problem, NATO expansion. Well, that fellow up there who used to be president of Norway, Jens Stoltenberg, who was the general secretary of NATO. Well, he said before the European Parliament, I can quote him pretty much. The accent's not quite right, but so the Russians didn't want NATO expansion. They didn't want it at all, right? And so they said, if you invite Ukraine into NATO, keep inviting them, we will have to invade to prevent it. And so we said, no. And what happened? We got 2 more members of NATO. We got Finland, we got Sweden, we got NATO expansion anyway. My God. This is, after almost 1 million young Ukrainians and Russians and others have been killed in this damn war that was not necessary. All they had to do was say, okay, no Ukraine in NATO. And here is the Secretary General of NATO saying that. My God, So this stuff is all out there. I mean, Trump knows about it, and if he needed a gentle reminder, Putin is the guy to give it to him. Now, there's one other thing that Garland, but maybe your people don't know, is that there was lots of treachery, lots of betrayal on the part of the U.S. with respect to agreements. Not only the one where we promised to cross our hearts, hope to die, never to expand NATO 1 inch to the east. That goes back to 1990, for God's sake. Okay. But a whole series of things, interim agreements were the Europeans guaranteed that Kiev would stop bombing Russian stock in the Donbass and all that stuff. So there's this whole series of things that are known, but one that is not known, and maybe some of your people know about it, is what happened just before the invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Okay, what happened was Putin got up before his military, top ones. They had to be a 4-star equivalent, Navy, Army, and the Secretary of Defense. And that was on the 19th. No, it was on the 21st of December 2021. And he said, look, we're in quite a fix here. The U.S. is building up its armament. It's got places in Romania and Poland within range of us, and they say these are ABM sites, and they say they're to defend against Iran. And the capsules in place there are exactly the ones that could accommodate Tomahawk and other missiles, So they're not with us 9 or 10 minutes for me to decide whether to what the rest of the world. He didn't say that. For me to decide what would happen, for you to tell me what happened. And they were looking. He said, now, the Americans, when they get hypersonic missiles, and he says, then they'll eventually get them, okay? Then, if they put them in Ukraine for 5 minutes, and they are going to put them in Ukraine. Whoa, 21st of December, 2021. What happens next? A call from the Kremlin to the White House. President Putin would really like to talk to President Biden, like right now. Oh, what's the problem? We talked 2 weeks ago. Please, right now. So Biden, to his credit, I guess, accepts the call. Oh, he's in Delaware. Oh, he doesn't have Tony Blinken. He doesn't have Sullivan with him. Oh, he talks to Putin on the telephone. And the readout says the president undertook. He said that the U.S. had no intention of putting offensive strike missiles in Ukraine. Period. End quote. Read it. Ushakov, the same guy who's playing a major role now beside Putin, was the one that did the readout. And he said that the next day. It was New Year's Eve. There was great rejoicing. Ushakov said, look, finally, they wouldn't entertain our treaty, but that 5 of those provisions in our treaty are addressed in this promise not to put offensive strike missiles. He's talking about intermediate strike missiles in Ukraine. Wow. So what happened? Well, long story short, the team that met under Wendy Sherman on the 9th and 10th of January, so just less than 2 weeks later, when Ryabkov, who was her opposite number, he said, well, okay, let's get right to tack. This is great news. Let's do the modalities of this refusal to put offensive strike missiles in Ukraine. And she says, huh? She said, well, what the president told our president on the 30th of January, just less than 2 weeks ago. Oh, I didn't hear about that. I don't have any instructions on that. Next thing you know, Lavrov is in Geneva, and he tracks Tony Blinken down. I don't know whether he's playing some guitar at a bar or something like that, but he tracked him down. He says, Tony, what's going on here? What about that undertaking from your president not to put offensive strike missiles in Ukraine? And Blinken says, give me a break. I wasn't with him. Sullivan wasn't with him. Forget about it. He didn't. It doesn't mean anything. We can put, and we will put, if Kiev asks us, we'll put offensive strike missiles, intermediate range nuclear equipped missiles in Ukraine. Now we might want to talk. Well, maybe would be willing to talk about how many, and limit the number of them. Okay, now that's the middle. That's actually, I think, was September 21st. I'm not September, but January. So less than a month after this undertaking. The last thing we know is that on the 12th of February, again, the next month, was the last time that Biden talked to Putin. And again, Ushakov gave the readout. Number one, the president would not address the issue of not putting nuclear or not putting strike missiles in Ukraine. And he would not also discuss anything about Ukraine not becoming a member of NATO. That was the 12th of February. Now, 2 days later, the number of airstrikes, that is, not airstrikes, but the artillery strikes on the Donbass increased in a geometric way, 10 times, 12 times as many, okay? And that was the immediate prelude. The well-armed, well-trained, NATO-trained army on Ukraine, most of them were right there behind, right there, ready to pounce on the Donbass. So it was a whole bunch of things that really were in the calculus of the Russians invading. And so to say that they were unprovoked, well, that's because you don't know any of this history, or to say it was illegal. Well, if it was unprovoked to that degree, we have Richard Falk, the fellow from Princeton, who wrote the book that my colleagues who are lawyers had to study on international law. He says that this is unsettled law that various lawyers, as is their custom, will give various interpretations. But in terms of what Falk thinks, the provocation was so blatant that to call the invasion illegal, even though it was against international law or internet, is a stretch. So not only was it not unprovoked, okay, it was, in Falk's opinion, very dubiously illegal. When people have the right to defend themselves, that's how Putin justified it. I think the argument makes sense, and that does not put me in Putin's pocket. That's simply an observer who's watched these things for a half century now.
Let me ask you this. So next, I tell you what I thought about the summit, the things that I found interesting. Number one, Sergei Lavrov showing up with the CCCP shirt. So Lavrov has a sense of humor, a dry humor. Clearly, I think he was trolling the Europeans, and he's hilarious guy, a brilliant guy. But what was interesting was afterwards, President Putin, in clear English, when President Trump said, "Yeah, we're going to meet again" or whatever, and in clear English, President Putin said, "Maybe in Moscow." And I thought, interesting. Your thoughts on, I'll put it like this. I thought overall the imagery and symbolism of where they were, and then President Putin laying wreaths on the graves of Soviet soldiers that died in World War II and were buried in America, in the US. I thought the vision of the two of them shaking hands on the red carpet, of getting together in the big Cadillac, driving together. I thought all of that was great symbolism, because the Europeans have basically, the Russians are a bunch of, they're hordes of evil, uncivilized savages who can't be dealt with. And it was the pageantry and regency of the, of leadership, the suits that, unlike, neither one of them had a green janitor's uniform on like Zelensky, but they had that great suits on. They looked, and this is not like, me, I'm a lefty kind of guy. I've always, if people say, "Who do you voted for?" I say, "I wrote in the ghost of Hugo Chavez," but my point being, it demonstrated to the world, or to at least the Western world that didn't already know this, no, the Russians are not isolated. Putin's not isolated. He's a powerful figure that must be acknowledged. Russia is a powerful country that must be acknowledged. And when Trump acknowledged, look, this guy's a powerful, let's shake hands, hey, we're gonna ride a Cadillac, I think the whole thing was good for the dynamics to push back against this argument that the Russians are uncivilized and that they shouldn't be recognized and they're isolated and all. I thought that stuff, this was a good thing, I thought. Anyway, Ray, your thoughts on this part of it?
Well, now it seems to me like you're in Putin's pocket if you would say something like that, Garland. Now, it was a big victory in that sense, and the Russians, for the Russians, okay? Now, for the powers that be in our country, and I refer specifically to the Mickey Mat, okay? This is the MIC that Eisenhower explained, the military-industrial complex, elongated over these several decades into the, if you got a pencil, this is on the final exam, okay? No pencil? Okay, get a keyboard. Here it is. The military-industrial, congressional, intelligence, media, academia, think tank complex, okay? Now, what's their big shtick? Their big shtick is eating up half of our discretionary income, more now, to build, make, sell weapons of war, okay? Now, why did I say media? Well, because the media is the crucible, the cornerstone of all this.
Did you
They
hear the
can't.
woman yelling out? Did you hear that woman yelling out at the
Yeah,
beginning? President Putin, are you going to stop killing civilians? I thought, why didn't you yell at Netanyahu?
yeah.
But anyway, go ahead, Ray.
But you can't do this kind of stuff without the media. Now, look at the media. I'm talking about the media that used to invite me maybe twice a year or something, but don't never do anymore. Well, who owns them? Oh, the rest of the Mickey Man, whose shtick, as I said, is to build and sell and profiteer from arms. You can't really do that unless you have a really plausible enemy. And my God, are we going to lose Russia as an enemy again? Look what happened last time, last time. Let me just give you one example. There was a firm called Kraus Maffei, a joint French and German firm in Germany that had the contract to build a common European battle tank. NATO needed that, right? Well, that was in the early 90s, or then went into the 2010 or so. Oh my God, Putin has no army. Putin is not making any threatening gestures. Kraus Maffei is dead in the water. Who needs a common European battle tank, right? And so what happens? Well, they overthrow the government in Kiev. And Russia, if people thought they wouldn't do this, they're crazy, takes Crimea, which contains its only all year long naval base, big one, and they don't really like the coup in Kiev, and so all of a sudden you have tension with Russia. All of a sudden that is blown up into Russia's intention to take over the rest of Europe, for God's sake. Oh, what happens to Kraus Maffei? Rheinmetall comes in and says, "We will build a common European battle tank." And Kraus Maffei, no, we have the contract. They go to court. They go to the German judiciary to fight this out, and then they realize, oh, there's enough. There's enough of this for both of us. So Kraus Maffei builds the body, right? And Rheinmetall would put the turret stuff on. So there's a microcosm instance of how you really need an arm. You really need an army if you need an enemy to have this kind of thing. So now the other thing is that I've looked at the media. I'm no expert, but it's generally known that as far as a corporation, mega corporation's profit center, I mean, it's not in the media. I mean, it's in Boeing, it's in Raytheon or General Dynamics, or it's in the ones that are making big bucks by building stuff like the F-35 that doesn't quite work with this rain and everything, but they'll have a new contract. Anyhow, they're the profiteering on this. Now, what about the news segment? Well, what part of the net profit, what this profit center at ABC or NBC, how much do they contribute to the earnings of this mega corporation? I don't know, but I would guess it's not any more than 10%, for God's sake. But it's really necessary to control it, isn't it? Because what are they going to say when it's proven that Boeing doesn't know how to build an airplane, or they're so it's really mischievous, and I don't want to make light of it. Mickey Matt now is in some dictionaries, and that's what it's become. And just to finish this thought, Eisenhower was very prescient. He knew it. He was a big military guy. I mean, he preferred to be called General Eisenhower, even after he left the presidency. Okay. Now, what am I saying here? I'm saying that what he said when he raised this problem, however deftly, he said, look, there's one antidote for protecting or defending against the outgrowth of this military-industrial complex, and that is a well-informed people, a well-informed populace, a well-informed citizenry, And Garland, despite the efforts of you and me, we ain't got one. Okay, we ain't got one. So that's why the media is right in the middle of Mickey Mat, and why we say, as if in all caps, media and academia. Well, look what's happening in the campuses, and they're all profiteering for the money they get from the Defense Department, and so media, and then the TT, the people that are in the think tanks, they're also doing this. So that's the answer to all this. Now that's a lot to contend with, and as if Trump didn't have enough of a challenge there. Okay, now he's taken on the deep state. He's taken on the deep state big time. I confess, I didn't think he would have the guts to do this. I didn't think he would tell Tulsi Gabbard, his director of national intelligence, and Kash Patel, head of the FBI, to go ahead and show how the Democrats did everything they could in close cooperation with the FBI, James Comey, the CIA, John Brennan. The names are all out there in these emails, exactly what they did to try to prevent Trump from becoming president. And when that failed, try to discredit him and cover their tracks, okay, by making him out to be in Putin's pocket. Now, famous story about Kash Patel. I don't know if it's apocryphal or not, but I suspect it is. He said, "Oh, look, I'm in here now. I'm headed to. I want you to look in every nook and cranny here and see if there's some secret place where we might find some stuff." And they do. They find this room, and they open the room, and it's just a bunch of look, the hard drives and stuff. It's some burn bags. So, well, we got to throw them down the chute. No, don't throw them down the throat. Let's see what's in them. Of course, then we had this famous annex, appendix burst right on the Democrats. So Grassley in Congress has all of a sudden got some guts, and he's endorsing these disclosures. So we have actually we have the gauntlet that Tulsi Gabbard threw down before the deep state. But we also now have the gauntlet that she has to traverse on her way to getting the truth out. Now, what's that gauntlet look like? The deep state, the Democrats, and people who want to be really, really careful about disclosures that might include murder. Now, I've been saying this for a long time. Call me a conspiracy theorist if you will, but it's not a conspiracy. There was a young man who was killed on the streets of Washington about 3:30 in the morning one time. He worked at the Democratic National Committee. There's sufficient evidence for me to infer that he was the one that took those emails out of the DNC computers, not via a hack, because a hack gives a signature on the internet that we know about a hack, okay? But he copied it from his screen, okay, onto a little thumb drive. And we have technical evidence saying that's the only way he could have done it, okay, he or anyone else. And we have the head of CrowdStrike, the firm that James Comey deferred to investigate the DNC emails and their computers, and the head of CrowdStrike testified. Now, get this, got that pencil? It's on the exam. Testified on December 5, 2017, that there was no physical evidence on the basis of their forensics, no physical evidence that anyone hacked those emails, so embarrassing to Hillary Clinton, from the DNC. No evidence that the Russians did it. No evidence that anyone did it. There was no hack of those emails. So now, why is this such a neuralgic issue? why is it that even really, really serious journalists like Jeff Girth, for example, he's commissioned by the Columbia Journalism Review to do a complete review of Russiagate. And he does a great job, except he forgets to include the part where the head of CrowdStrike is asked by Adam Schiff, so, Mr. Sean Henry, tell us how the Russians hacked those emails. so, Sean Henry starts, and his lawyer grabs him and says, oh, you're under oath, right? Well, actually, there wasn't any hack. There wasn't any exfiltration. We looked at it closely, but so now that was December the 5th, okay? As I said, that word never got out because Adam Schiff came in the next month, put it in the bottom of his safe. You check with your neighbors, okay? You find out if they still believe that the Russians hacked those damaging emails, damaging to Hillary Clinton. I'll bet you that 8 out of 10 will say, of course they did. It's been all over the place. That's because Sean Henry's testimony has been kept under wraps until it was released 7 years ago or so. But no major media has said that. So what am I saying? I talked to Jeff Girth, and I said, yeah, that was a great piece, 4-part series you did for the Columbia Law Review. Great. But how could you have missed the testimony of the head of CrowdStrike that there was no exfiltration, there was no hack? How could you? And he says, oh, I had that in there. I'm sure I had that in there. I said, well, it's not in there now. Oh, are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure. And he looks, he says, oh, it's not in there. Well, I don't know what happened. I had all kinds of hell with the editors and all. They wouldn't even pay me, you know. You could tell, and we're delaying. And then they had, here's a new draft. And there's no way to distinguish the new draft from the old draft. In other words, have ways to do that, right? They didn't do that. And so I guess I just got too tired. I didn't really look at the final edited draft. So I guess that's what happened. Wow. So what am I saying here? That's the Columbia Journalism Review, for God's sake. Now, why are they so sensitive about that? It's the old reason. If it was not a hack by Russia or anyone else, somebody else did it. Now, how many candidates do you have for that? Well, I only know one name, and that is Seth Rich. Okay, and I know, and most of your audience would not know, that I was subpoenaed by Aaron Rich, his brother, to respond to all kinds of detailed questions as to why I thought, with my comrades and veteran intelligence professionals for sanity, that the Russians didn't hack, that it was some other way of getting at him. Why I thought that? Bill Binney, Ed Loomis, Kurt Wiebe, the 3 NSA alumni who wrote most of this stuff from a technical point of view, they too were subpoenaed. I was the last one subpoenaed. For a while, I had subpoena envy, I guess you could call it. So they came to my neighborhood and they subpoenaed me. Now, why the hell would Aaron Rich want to lean on me to make sure that I stop saying it wasn't the Russians? Well, the answer is, it seems to me, that then it had to be somebody else. And with the CrowdStrike people saying it wasn't a hack, who could that be? Well, Aaron Rich is the brother of Seth Rich, okay? And if you look how that played out in Fox News and all that stuff, they settled for a lot of money, And not only that, we have Cy Hirsch in an intercepted telephone conversation saying that Aaron and Seth had both talked with WikiLeaks and actually asked for some money for this release. So we have lots of stuff, but you know what? Don't go there. Don't ever mention Seth Rich, because that will brand you as a security risk and as a conspiracy theorist. And why is that so neuralgic? Because all these other crimes that were committed, well, heinous as they were, as destructive of our branches of government and our democracy as they were, at least they didn't involve murder, right, Garland? Murder, you know all about murder, you from your experience as a police inspector and so forth. So this is really getting pretty serious. All I'm saying in this connection is that Trump and Tulsi and Kash Patel, and I guess that Attorney General that we have bit off an awful lot. Um, they will be fighting tooth and nail to weaken Trump in everything he tries to do. And this will include what he's trying to do in terms of working out a decent relationship with Russia. And they succeeded last time around for 4 years to emasculate him, to make it impossible for him to do what most sensible people think is a good thing, have a decent relationship with Russia. So I'm sorry to let it go on this way, but it takes a little while to put this thing together. You are an investigator. You still are a damn fine analyst, Garland. Tell me what you think. Do you think I'm on the right track?
You're absolutely on the right track. And the issue is this, and I think the Trump people realize this, and people are saying, well, Trump's the deep state, Trump's this. I think what people don't understand is there are various factions in Washington. And these factions, you've got some people who's like, oh, no, we shouldn't be here. We should be attacking Iran. No, you're wrong. Eldridge Colby, we should be attacking China. No, we've got to back down. Oh, we got to go after Russia. So there's factions battling. But within that, there is a consistent group of people who here's the thing you got to add. This could expose the truth about the FBI. A person who worked with I didn't work for, but I worked with the FBI for a year, with the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force. I know about them. And anyone who tells you that they're incompetent and they screwed things up, they're some of the most well-educated, knowledgeable, best trained people I ever met in my life. Anything they didn't do wasn't an accident. Anything they did, they didn't overlook or accidentally. If they did it, it was intentional because they know what the hell they're doing. And here's the problem. Seth Rich was rubbed out and they covered it up intentionally, deliberately. They hid why, if you have according to them, just another robbery and shooting in Washington, D.C., why does the FBI come in? The FBI doesn't come in for a robbery and shooting, a generic robbery and shooting. And then why do they seize his phone, his electronics, everything, and then hide it for a year? And when a judge says, all right, give it up, they say no. And even right now, the FBI is fighting giving up Seth Rich's laptop, because if somebody starts looking around, they may see emails to WikiLeaks or wherever. But my point being, I think in the context of what we're talking about now, even if you say Trump's trying to, and the people are looking at it saying Ukraine's going to be defeated and we want to be as far from that as we can, we don't want to take this one on the chin. I think they had to go after Russiagate in order to give them the political cover they needed to do it. Because as soon as they said, we're going to meet with Putin in Alaska or anywhere, the media was going to go after them. They're Russian bots. We knew it. They're working for Putin. The Mickey Matt, the whole thing was all going to turn like a battleship that brings all of its 16-inch guns around. And they were all going to fire the same round. He's working for Putin. And they had to eliminate that. They had to blunt that. They had to preemptively strike so that couldn't happen. So they went after it. And they even leaked. What have they even said? They've said, well, we've got to let this information out because we're going to charge some of these people with crimes. We're going to lock some of these people up. We're going to put the cuffs on people. And they've let this out. And they said, before we do that, you need to know, the American people need to know why we're locking up. They didn't say Brennan and Clapper, but I think those names will be at the top of their list, right? I think that what they were...
Actually, Tulsi Gabbard did say Brennan and James Comey by name.
So I think what they had to do was they had to, as they'll say, put the fear of God in those out there who were poised in the starting gate to scream, Trump's working for Putin. They had to send a message. You know what's happening to the last people that did that? you might not want to play that game this time. So I think they had to go after Russiagate, or they couldn't set up meetings with the Russians.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know, one of the high ironies here, and it came into full bloom as I looked at this summit, when Trump met with Putin in Helsinki, 2018, and it was really interesting. He's there in this press conference, and they asked him kind of two things. Now, one was, what, Mr. Trump, you know that the Russians interfered in that election so that you could beat Hillary Clinton. So what do you think now? Here you are with the guy who interfered. And Trump says, they said, who are you going to believe? Putin denies it. And he said, I don't know who to believe. Could you hold on for a second? Yo, here I am. Are you okay? Okay.
We'll give Ray a moment or two. He's tending to some things.
Oh, you need this, huh? Okay. Oh, good. You okay? Because I'm on air. Okay. Okay, Garland, here it comes.
No problem, Ray. Take your time, brother.
Yeah. So, wives come first here.
Oh, yes.
So just to finish this up, it was really amazing here. Here they are in Helsinki, and he says, I don't know who to believe. And of course, the president, my God, are you believing the Russians before your own intelligence services? Well, you know, I just wonder if part of the conversation during those 3 hours yesterday was yesterday, whatever it was, 15th, yeah, yesterday. Whether Putin did say, I look back with some humor on you saying the right thing. You didn't know who to believe, but now you know who to believe, don't you? The other thing, and this came up with one of the drafters of this terrible intelligence community assessment. Okay, the one that Obama said you have to write this, and kind of emasculate the incoming president even before he gets into office. So one of the actually the principal drafter, what's it, Michael Van Landingham.
Yep.
Good name anyway. So he's asked, how do you defend what all this stuff is coming out here? Were you influenced by leadership? Oh, no, I wasn't influenced by leadership. You know what the ironic part of that is, Garland? He might be telling the truth. Remember, these were hand-picked analysts, okay? When you hand-pick analysts, you hand-pick the conclusions that they're going to reach. And some of the other things he said about these terrible Russians, unreconstructed communists, Van Landingham may not have been aware that he was being picked to say exactly what he felt. So the other thing, and what I'm trying to say is, he says, and this ridiculous thing about people arguing that Putin didn't favor Trump and didn't help him to come into office. Come on, he says, in Helsinki, don't you remember in Helsinki 2018? They're standing there together, and they ask Putin, the Western press, they asked Putin right there. They said, so, Mr. Putin, who did you favor in the 2016 election? And he said it. He said it right there. He said, oh, of course, this guy, Trump. That's evidence? My God. What's he going to say? Well, I really preferred Hillary, but you go with what you got. I got this clock here. Oh, come on. So that's the kind of evidence that these guys, who, as I say, are probably people who have been trained in these graduate schools these days, I don't know what to believe in terms of what Russia's really after, or Putin. Right? So it's quite possible that he and maybe one of those other four didn't have to be persuaded by step increases or promotions or bonuses at the end of the year, which were given to the ones on Iraq who falsified weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. So it's kind of it's an awful situation what the intelligence community has become. The only saving grace now is that we have new management, and that so far as I know, they're holding to the view that there's no evidence yet that Iran is working on a weapon, on a nuclear weapon, as opposed to enrichment and all that. Now, even that cluck, what was his name? Bill Burns, who was the head of the CIA. Now, he was a good diplomat. What the diplomats do, they hear from the president and they do what the president says. So if the president said, "Oh, the Russians are really bad," or no, so that's what Bill Burns is going to say. 2 years ago, over 2 years ago, July 2 years ago, he said, "Oh, Putin has already lost, and his army has been discredited before the whole world to see." So anyhow, before he leaves, like yeah, December of December before Trump comes in again, Bill Burns makes a couple comments to the press, and he says, "Now, what I'm very proud of is that we have stuck by that conclusion going back to 2007 that Iran is not working on a nuclear weapon, and I'll just tell you that if they begin, we will learn almost immediately, and we'll be able to stop it." Okay. Whoa. Well, I mean, my former colleagues did hold fast to that conclusion up until March of this year, when Tulsi Gabbard briefed that same conclusion, except she said it all depends on the supreme leader. There's a fatwa. It's sort of like an encyclical, but encyclicals are, in the Catholic faith, are sort of optional, right? Fatwas, not so much, right? So, what's the deal here? Well, number one, we will not be able to find out so quickly because the IAEA has been thrown out of Iran. That's number one. Number two, the supreme leader of Iran is being pressed very strongly to get rid of the fatwa. How do you do that? How do you annul a fatwa? Maybe you say, "We do a new fatwa," or whatever. He hasn't done that yet. Okay. And then at least one good source I have that knows about Iran says, I asked him, could he just say, "Okay, we're changing the fatwa and just don't tell anybody"? No, he can't do that. What do you have to do? He's got to go through the parliament, through it's a big issue. That damn big issue, Mcgovern. Can't you understand it? If he changes the fatwa, we'll know about it immediately. So what does that mean? That means it's a little bit complicated, but not much. Okay. We won't be able to find out so quickly because the IAE cameras and everything else are not all over this place. But, we could look to see if the fatwa is changed. Meanwhile, we'll have more doubt about whether they're working on a weapon in addition to the enrichment stuff. And my view is that Iran has the kind of hypersonic missiles that already represent a deterrent for the Israelis. They don't need nuclear weapons. The Russians don't want them to have it. Neither do the Chinese. There's limited benefit in them developing a nuclear weapon. Put the enrichment real high, so everybody says, "Oh my God!" Then they're like, "Well, that suits their interests as well." But so what I'm saying is that there are some honest people in the CIA, people who stuck by their guns. And what could be more controversial than saying Iran is not working on a nuclear weapon when Netanyahu is coming to Congress and saying just the opposite every 3 years? I mean, that's pretty good. So let's not lose faith. Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's a lot of bathwater, but there's a baby of analytic integrity that could bloom once again. Let's hope and pray that those folks are coming to the fore now and being able to shove to the side the sycophants who want to get a promotion or a cash bonus from saying what the president wants to hear.
Yeah, and I think there are a lot of people right now who are looking over their shoulders. I've been reading that there's a lot of whistleblowers coming forward, people who maybe had integrity in the past and said, look, under this environment, I can't say anything or I'll be fired or whatever. And now that people are starting to look around, they're saying, well, now that you're asking, way back then, since you're asking, I'm going to tell you what I know. And I think there's a lot of that going on. So we will see. I think it's good. Did you have a comment on Gaza before we go, Russ? I keep getting everybody's name. I'm calling everybody Russia or Pedro or something. Ray, did you have a comment on Gaza before we go?
Gaza is the moral issue of the day. Not only genocide now, but forced starvation. I have a close friend who is a poet. And he wrote this poem. If we have another minute, I'd like to recite it or read
Certainly.
it for you. It's in memory of Wadea and all children caught in the hatred of war. My name is Wadea. I'm told it means humble or modest, calm and peaceful. My birthday was 3 weeks ago. Today I was stabbed to death 26 times. Can you remember when you were 6 years old? What would it feel like being stabbed 26 times? Do you have any children who are 6 years old? Do you have any grandchildren who are 6 years old? Can you feel their pain being stabbed 26 times? Can there be hatred so deep that a child like me, 6 years old, should feel so much pain being stabbed 26 times? People of the world, next time you take sides, next time you promote hate, next time you promote war, remember me, remember my pain and what it felt like to be stabbed 26 times.
That's outstanding, Ray. A very, very powerful poem, and I certainly appreciate it. Thank you very much, Ray.
Let's get off our couches now and see what we can do. The heinous sin, of course, is that we enable this. Netanyahu not do this without our arms, our money, and all that stuff. So if we pretend to be a democracy and the people we elect do this kind of heinous activity, and it's up to us to change it. Let's not be obedient Germans. Let's not wait for somebody else to do it. There is only us. There never has been any other.
Ray Mcgovern, everyone, you can find a lot of his work at Consortium News, but everyone should follow Ray on X, and of course raymcgovern.com. It's a great website, and it's Ray's website. It's maintained, it's updated daily, and all of the stuff that he does, all of his writing, all of his appearances, you name it. And Ray does a lot of good work every single day, and what we it's greatly appreciated by all of those out there. And so go to raymcgovern.com and follow Ray, keep up with what he's doing, and support Ray in any way you can. Thanks a lot, Ray, and I certainly appreciate it. Thank you. I just want to remind everybody, follow me on Rockfin and Rumble and Telegram and all that stuff. Follow me on Substack. Go there and subscribe. If you can afford Patreon or buy me a coffee or whatever, that would be great. But even if you can't, the most important thing you can do is share this on all your social media platforms. We're out.